I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to move, unable to open my eyes, when I heard my husband laugh. Not a nervous laugh, not a scared one, a relieved laugh. He was standing just a few feet away, holding another woman's hand, calmly discussing my funeral. The flowers, the guest list. What he would inherit when I was gone. They thought I could not hear them. They thought I was already dead. But trapped inside my own body, listening to the man I trusted plan my burial, I realized something terrifying. I was not dying. I was being erased. And then the nurse walked in and said something that changed everything. If you have ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect you, stay with me. This is not a story about forgiveness. It is about survival. And what happens when someone underestimates the wrong woman? I am Alina Moore, and I was 36 years old when my life quietly split into two parts: the person I believed I was and the person I had to become in order to survive. That division was not sudden. It was subtle, insidious, and entirely unrecognizable at first. The moment of rupture did not arrive with a scream, nor with a dramatic confrontation. It arrived in quiet, careful increments, like a shadow stretching across the life I thought I knew. By the time I understood what had happened, the woman I used to be had already begun to disappear. Before everything fell apart, I believed I had a stable life. Not perfect, not glamorous, not extraordinary, just steady. The kind of life that no one warns you about because it looks safe. I had a marriage that appeared solid from the outside. That is what everyone saw. What no one knew was the slow, almost invisible erosion of trust, voice, and presence that was happening quietly every day. I met Marcus Moore 9 years earlier at a charity fundraiser hosted by his real estate firm. He was confident, poised, and precise in a way that drew people in. When he looked at you, it felt deliberate. Every word, every gesture carried intention. At the time, it felt flattering. At the time, I did not see the edge beneath the polish. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized design company. Organized, reliable, quietly ambitious. The kind of woman who noticed the small details others overlooked. Marcus claimed he admired that about me. He said I grounded him, that I made his life feel orderly. I took it as love. I believed it. I did not realize then that admiration can be a mask for ownership. We married after 2 years, bought a modest house with pale walls and too much natural light. We hosted dinners. We traveled occasionally. We built routines that felt permanent, adult, enviable. From the outside, we looked secure, reliable, content. I thought that stability meant safety. I thought I understood the life I had built. I was wrong. The first thing I lost was not my marriage. It was my voice. At first, it was subtle. Marcus began answering questions directed at me, making decisions without consulting me, choosing restaurants, planning trips, managing finances as if my input were a courtesy, not a necessity. He framed it as efficiency, polite, helpful. I told myself I was lucky to have a husband who took charge. I told myself that control was a gift. Then I became sick. It began with exhaustion that sleep could not fix, a heaviness in my limbs that felt wrong. At first I brushed it off as stress. Deadlines, work pressures, life. Marcus encouraged me to rest, but there was an edge to his concern that I could not name. There was a watchfulness, careful and calculated, that felt foreign. I dismissed the feeling I always did. The symptoms worsened. Dizziness, nausea, a pain that bloomed behind my eyes and spread down my spine. Doctor visits blurred together. Tests, blood draws. Waiting rooms filled with a scent of disinfectant and impatience. Time became a slow, oppressive blur. Marcus accompanied me to every appointment, held my hand, answered questions before I could form the words. Sometimes I would open my mouth, begin to speak, only to hear him provide an answer first. Months, he said once, when a physician asked how long I had been fatigued. That was not what I was going to say. But I said nothing. When the diagnosis came, it was serious, but not immediately terminal. Complicated, manageable, the specialist said, with treatment and patience. Relief washed over me like warmth. Marcus did not share that relief. He asked questions about worst-case scenarios, about timelines, about outcomes if treatment failed. His tone was precise, detached, almost clinical. I began to notice the subtle shift. My illness gave him permission to take control of everything: our finances, my schedule, my medical paperwork. I was tired, weak, grateful for help. I let it happen, and slowly I began to disappear. The house felt colder, quieter. Marcus spent more time in other rooms, took calls behind closed doors, guarded his phone as though it contained state secrets. When I asked questions, he answered with practiced patience. "You need to focus on getting better," he said. "Let me handle this." I believed him, because believing was easier than imagining the alternative. Even in my own home, I began to feel a creeping displacement. Subtle things. The way he spoke to me as though I were fragile. The way he planned and decided without consulting me. The way I began to shrink in my own life, letting him occupy spaces I had once thought were mine. The night I collapsed, it happened without warning. I rose from the couch to get water, and the world tilted violently. Pain exploded behind my eyes. A body gave way. I hit the floor. Marcus shouted my name. Then darkness. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of monitors and the muted hum of machines. The air smelled sterile and thin. My body felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else. Tubes ran into my arms. My head throbbed with relentless ache. I tried to move. I could not. Panic flared, then faded into exhaustion. Voices drifted in and out. Nurses, doctors, Marcus. Time lost meaning. At some point, I became aware, fully conscious yet unable to signal it. My eyes closed, but my mind was sharp, alert. Listening, I began to hear him. Marcus laughed, not nervously, not with fear, a laugh that carried relief. There was another voice, softer, younger, female, close enough for me to hear the movement of her clothing. "What about the house?" she asked. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Already handled. Everything is in my name now." My heart raced. They spoke of logistics, inheritance, cremation. Plans for my funeral were discussed as though I were already absent. I lay there paralyzed, listening to my life being dismantled. The injustice was not only the affair, it was the certainty, the casual erasure of a living person. The assumption that I was too weak to matter. Tears burned behind my closed eyes. I wanted to scream. To move, to expose them. But my body did not obey. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying and clarifying. If I did not survive, he would win. And if I did survive, nothing would ever be the same again. The days after I woke in that hospital bed were a blur of pain, confusion, and the creeping realization that nothing would ever be simple again. Marcus did not apologize. He did not check on me with genuine concern. Instead, he moved through the hospital room like it was his stage, carefully performing the role of a devoted husband while simultaneously stripping away every ounce of dignity I had left. He managed the doctors, the nurses, the paperwork. Every time a nurse asked me a question, Marcus answered first, fast and confident, cutting off anything I tried to say. My voice, already quiet and strained from illness, was dismissed as a side effect of fatigue. I realized then that he did not just want control over me. He wanted absolute authority over how I existed in this world, even in my own body. At first it was subtle, small gestures, choosing my meals without asking, moving personal items around without explanation, adjusting medication schedules under the guise of efficiency. Each action, small on its own, built a quiet storm of humiliation. It was relentless. And the more I struggled, the more he tightened his grip, claiming I was too weak, too ill to make decisions for myself. Then the lies began. He told friends and family that I was fragile, that I needed constant care, that I was too sick to handle anything serious. At first, people were sympathetic. Then their sympathy became a cage. My parents called less frequently, speaking to Marcus instead of me. Old friends visited and whispered about my condition behind his back. I felt invisible, like a shadow being erased from the room. One afternoon, when I managed to sit up with help, I overheard him on the phone. "Yes," he said smoothly, "everything is under control. Alina is resting. She cannot be bothered with the details. Leave it to me." I wanted to shout, to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I clenched my fists under the blanket, trying to keep my body still while my mind burned. He did not see me as a person. Not anymore. He saw me as a problem to manage, a set of inconvenient obligations, a trophy to display when convenient. The affair became more obvious as the weeks went by. I could hear whispers through the cracked door when Marcus thought I was asleep. Text messages that buzzed loudly on his phone, always ending with the same emoji, laughing, intimate, mocking. I never confronted him. Not yet. The risk of revealing how aware I had become was dangerous. I needed information, evidence, proof. He became careless. One evening, he left a folder on the counter in the kitchen while he spoke with a woman on the phone. Bills, bank, statements, emails, names. The quiet certainty in which he operated gave me everything I needed to see just how far he had planned my erasure. Every interaction became a test of endurance. At the hospital, he would arrange my appointments without consulting me. He would arrive early and leave late, claiming I needed him. When I tried to speak, he would pat my hand and smile. "You need to save your strength," he said. The words were soft. The implication was sharp. He was erasing my agency under the guise of care. There were moments, brief and horrifying, when I caught glimpses of his true self. One night, when the room was quiet and the machines hummed their steady rhythm, he leaned over my bed and whispered to me, barely above the hum, "If this treatment does not work, at least I will be free." I froze. The words were not an accident. They were deliberate. He'd planned it, spoken them as if I were already gone, as if my survival did not matter. The mistress became bolder as well. She appeared at the hospital, smiling in a way designed to provoke. She asked questions I had not consented to answer. She leaned close, laughed at jokes only she and Marcus shared. My anger simmered, but I stayed silent. Every action, every glance, every word was a trap. I had to be careful. I could not reveal my awareness. Outside the hospital, the house became a theater of his manipulation. He moved my personal belongings, changed my schedule, redirected my finances. Bills I had never authorized were paid. Accounts I had built over years were emptied. He was meticulous, obsessive, confident in the knowledge that I could do nothing. Friends started to notice. I saw the doubt in their eyes when I mentioned something and Marcus contradicted me instantly. I saw the silent apology in their expressions when they assumed he knew best. Each small betrayal, each slight, compounded the suffocating tension in my chest. I felt cornered. Every move I tried to make was monitored, redirected, or nullified. The breaking point was not a single event. It was a series of moments, each one sharpening the knife of resentment and fear in my mind. He made jokes about my weakness in front of the nurses. He dismissed my questions with exaggerated patience. He rearranged my medications under the pretense of expert advice, knowing full well that even small mistakes would make me doubt myself. And then came the invitation that revealed the depth of his cruelty. A small gathering, a casual dinner in my own home, orchestrated by Marcus and the woman he called his girlfriend. Friends and family arrived, oblivious to the tension they were stepping into. I sat at the head of the table, physically present but emotionally absent. He orchestrated conversation like a conductor, steering every topic away from me, towards his achievements, towards shared jokes with her. I wanted to scream, wanted to collapse, and show the world the truth in front of everyone. Instead, I sipped my wine, kept my face neutral, and cataloged every move. I knew I had to survive him in order to win. Even the staff at the hospital began to treat me differently. They saw Marcus as a competent, reliable spouse, while my own words were filtered through him. Each time I tried to assert myself, he would intervene with a calm, almost apologetic tone. "She is just tired," he would say. "It is better if I explain." He was slowly convincing everyone, including himself, that I was incapable, fragile, fading. That he was the only one capable of handling life's details. Every day, I watched him grow bolder, more careless, more confident in his power. He believed his control was absolute. He believed I could do nothing. But I was awake. I was listening. I was remembering. Every whispered conversation, every laugh shared at my expense, every manipulation was being logged in my mind. He thought I was a patient, sick, and powerless. That assumption would become his downfall. The tension escalated to the point that even breathing in his presence became a careful act. I learned to move silently, to observe without revealing. Every interaction became a chess move. Every glance, every tone of voice was a clue. I started imagining the revenge I would one day take, though I did not yet know how or when. By the time I was discharged, I was exhausted, sick, and still weak. But my mind had sharpened in ways I could never have anticipated. Marcus believed he had one. He believed I was fragile and pliable. He believed he had erased me. It could not have been more wrong. And that is the danger of underestimating someone you think is broken. Every single act of cruelty, every tiny betrayal, every calculated dismissal had created a pressure cooker inside me. And like any pressure cooker, once the valve is forced open, the release is explosive. The stage was set. The antagonist had revealed his worst self. And I, though battered, was ready. But the story was only beginning. The moment I realized that survival alone was not enough came quietly, almost imperceptibly in the dim light of my bedroom one evening. I had returned home from the hospital, my body weak but recovering, and Marcus was already there. The house smelled faintly of his cologne mixed with something floral, her perfume, I assumed, lingering in the air like a ghost. I had spent weeks pretending I was too fragile to notice. Pretending I was still the powerless woman he thought I had become. But that night something inside me snapped. He walked in, smiling, holding a glass of wine. His energy was casual, confident, as if he owned the house, as if he owned my very life. He placed the glass on the nightstand near my bed and leaned against the wall. "You should not exert yourself," he said, voice calm. "Let me handle everything." I watched him, feeling the old fear rise, then fall, replaced by a burning clarity. Fear had been my ally, keeping me silent, keeping me alive, but fear had limits. And Marcus had crossed every conceivable line. He had laughed about my death, erased my voice from decisions, and welcomed another woman into the space that was mine. That is when I realized that silence was not survival. Silence was complicity. I lifted my head and looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had called himself my husband, the man who had sworn loyalty, the man who had promised partnership, was not a partner. He was a predator, calculating, cruel, and he was complacent because he believed I was weak. "I am listening," I said softly, almost too quietly to be heard. He frowned. "What do you mean? You think I am powerless?" I said, voice gaining strength. "You think I am weak. You think I am gone. Ka? But I am right here. I see everything. I hear everything. I am done pretending." For the first time, he faltered. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but there was a flicker in his eyes that betrayed uncertainty. A crack in the confidence he had carried like armor for months. He stepped closer, a forced smile on his face. "Alina, you are sick. You need to rest. You cannot be thinking clearly." I laughed softly, a sound that startled even me. "Do not mistake my illness for incapacity. You made every decision assuming I would not survive. That was your mistake. You have underestimated me. And underestimation is dangerous. He took a step back. The faint scent of her perfume was still in the air, clinging to him. His casual control was slipping, though he did not fully realize it yet. I could see the tension in his jaw, the subtle shifting of his weight. He believed he could regain dominance with a few words. But I had already crossed the threshold. I thought back to every moment that had broken me down, every whispered conversation, every stolen bank statement, every laugh shared at my expense, every lie, every manipulation. I cataloged them in my mind, one by one, until they were no longer sources of pain, but fuel. Fuel for clarity, fuel for strategy. Fuel for the revenge that had begun forming long before I spoke my first words of defiance. My hand shook slightly, but it was not fear. It was adrenaline. My body remembered weakness, but my mind remembered strength. I had survived what he believed would kill me. I had endured humiliation and betrayal. And now I realized something essential. Survival was not enough. I needed justice. I needed restoration. I needed him to feel, in some measure, the vulnerability and despair he had imposed on me. The first plan in my mind was simple: gather evidence. Every conversation, every transaction, every subtle move he had made to erase me needed documentation. I could not act blindly. He was clever, but cleverness always leaves traces. And I was becoming cleverer still. That night I lay in bed, eyes open, plotting with a precision that surprised even me. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken anxiety radiating from Marcus as he tried to maintain composure. He did not yet know that I had woken fully, that I was aware, that I had already started playing the long game. I realized that patience was now my greatest weapon. Acting too soon could backfire. Acting without complete information could give him an edge. I needed time, observation, and strategy, and I had both. I began to rehearse my interactions. Every smile, every nod, every conversation would serve dual purposes to maintain the illusion of fragility while gathering intelligence. I needed him to continue underestimating me. Every whispered joke, every casual lie, every manipulation was a clue, a puzzle piece I would later assemble. Sleep eluded me that night. I watched him move through the house, still thinking he controlled everything, while I lay awake, heart hammering, mind alert. The air was thick with tension, electric and charged. I could feel my resolve solidifying into something dangerous and precise. By the next morning, my decision was complete. I would no longer be passive. I would not wait for luck or coincidence. I would reclaim everything he had taken. I would expose him. I would dismantle the illusion he had built around himself. And I would do it in a way that ensured no one would ever mistake my weakness again. The nurse who had first warned him that I could hear everything became my first ally. She observed his behavior, discreetly noted patterns, and confirmed what I suspected. He believed he was untouchable, that hubris would be his undoing. I started to reconstruct every aspect of our life as it had been manipulated. Bank statements, emails, contracts, messages, even hospital records, all of it became material for the strategy I was forming. I realized that the path forward required not brute force, not confrontation, but meticulous precision. A chess game where every move counted. I remembered the fear I had felt in the hospital room, hearing them plan my funeral, imagining a future in which I did not exist. That fear transformed into clarity. The vulnerability I had experienced became armor. Every tear shed, every insult endured, every dismissive glance from him had been rehearsed by life to prepare me for this moment. The breaking point had come not with a shout, not with a dramatic confrontation. It came with understanding. Understanding that the only way to survive and reclaim power was to see the entire situation as a strategy game. Understanding that patience, observation, and cunning could achieve what anger alone could not. Understanding that his underestimation of me was the weapon I had been waiting for. By the end of that day, I had a plan forming in my mind. A map of action that would require careful execution, impeccable timing, and emotional control. I would appear fragile, I would appear weak. I would allow him to continue his mistakes. But underneath the surface, I would be calculating every move, preparing the moment when his arrogance would collide with my precision. That night, as he finally retired to his study, unaware of the storm brewing behind my calm eyes, I closed my journal and allowed a single thought to dominate my mind. He will regret underestimating me. Not immediately. Not with a shout or a confrontation, but eventually. And when that day comes, he will feel the weight of every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word he ever spoke. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and near erasure. And now, I was ready to turn survival into victory. The turning point was complete. Fear had been replaced by resolve. Weakness had been replaced by strategy. And power, once stolen from me, would be reclaimed with precision, patience, and relentless determination. The war had not yet begun, but the pieces were in place. The opponent believed the game was over. He was wrong. And I, Alina Moore, was awake. Fully, dangerously awake. Revenge begins with patience, not anger. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Marcus moved through the house with the confidence of a man certain he had won. Every step he took, every casual glance at his phone, every laugh that echoed down the hall became information. Patterns I could study. Weaknesses I could exploit. Every motion, every habitual routine was a thread I could pull when the time came. I woke before him each morning. The house was still, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. I memorized his habits, when he checked emails, the way he cradled his coffee, the precise moment he left the room. I cataloged everything. Patterns reveal openings. Openings become weapons. I kept my performance flawless, weak, tired, fragile, grateful for his help. Every word carefully measured, every movement deliberate. He did not see the calculation behind my calm eyes. He did not know that each polite smile, each whisper of thanks, was a lie mask concealing the storm that was forming inside me. I started with evidence, not assumptions, not suspicion, proof. Without proof, nothing I planned could succeed. One afternoon, while he stepped out for a call, I moved into his office. The air smelled of leather, cologne, and a faint floral perfume that was not mine. I opened the top drawer. Inside were folders labeled in his careful handwriting: financial statements, legal documents, property deeds. My hands trembled slightly as I photographed every page with my phone, careful to preserve the integrity of every detail. Each document revealed how meticulously he had been dismantling my life while I lay unconscious. Later, I accessed his emails. He had grown careless, thinking I was too weak to understand technology. I had memorized his passcode, repeated it in my mind until it became instinct. That night, I read their messages, intimate, mocking, cruel. Discussions of my prognosis, my funeral, the way he believed he could erase me completely. Screenshots of bank confirmations, plans for transferring assets, everything meticulously recorded. I saved everything, encrypted it, made backups. Nothing could be destroyed. Nothing could disappear. I recruited allies quietly. The nurse who first warned him that I could hear everything became invaluable. She discreetly documented inconsistencies in my care, medications altered without approval, interruptions during consultations, manipulations in front of medical staff. She did not lie. She only recorded what she saw. Her notes became part of the evidence I was amassing. I demanded private consultations with my doctors, carefully asking questions that revealed his lies. Their surprise strengthened my resolve. He believed I was incapable. Every day he underestimated me, and every day I grew stronger in my knowledge. Then came the attorney. Contacted him through a friend Marcus did not know. Neutral office, neutral walls. My hands folded tightly in my lap. I laid out every detail, every betrayal, every manipulated account, every cruel joke, every act meant to erase me. When he looked up, he said, "You have a very strong case. You are not powerless. Not by a long shot. Relief surged, but it was fleeting. Relief does not win wars. Strategy does. I waited. Marcus had to continue making mistakes. I smiled at him at dinner, thanked him for his care, allowed the mistress to appear, flaunting her presence. Every bold move they made became a threat I would use later. Every whispered conversation, every laugh, every casual insult I endured fed the plan. I kept a journal. Dates, times, exact words spoken, who was present, who moved where. Memory fades, but documentation does not. Every entry built a foundation for inevitability. I practiced emotional restraint with discipline. When anger surged, I breathed. When fear returned, I reminded myself it had already done its job keeping me alive long enough to act. I was no longer reacting. I was calculating. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Marcus finalized his largest manipulation, the sale of a shared property, signed under my name while I appeared compliant, fragile, weak. He believed I would not notice. That was his mistake. That document, forged under false pretenses, became the catalyst. I contacted my attorney. Procedures were set in motion. Accounts were frozen. Summons filed. Authorities notified. Evidence meticulously collected over months now spoke for itself. When Marcus returned that evening, his first hint of unease was subtle. A card declined. Calls going unanswered. Small failures he could not explain. And suddenly, the carefully constructed reality he had built around my supposed fragility began to collapse. I watched silently, calmly, unassuming, because the most powerful revenge is not loud. It is inevitable. The moment he realized the truth was approaching, I let him continue his unraveling. When he stormed into the bedroom, furious and demanding explanations, I remained seated, calm, collected. I let him reveal his own hubris. Every accusation he hurled, every frantic gesture only confirmed the strength of the trap I had set. The documents, the emails, the recordings, the witnesses, everything would expose him completely. The air felt charged, thick, electric. His arrogance had become his blind spot, and I waited patiently as he fumbled, rage colliding with realization. I did not speak. I let the evidence speak. He had built a life on underestimating me, and now he would watch it collapse with his own eyes. Every step of my plan had been deliberate, every move rehearsed mentally, every outcome anticipated. He believed control meant safety. He did not know that control could be weaponized against him. That night, as he raged and stumbled through the consequences, I understood fully the truth of what patience and precision could do. Revenge is not chaos. 'Tis strategy. Observation, calculation. It is inevitability. I had turned every betrayal, every humiliation, every act of cruelty into fuel, into proof, into power. And now, the final act was approaching, the moment where everything he believed would protect him would fail, and I would reclaim what was mine. The day it began, the air felt charged. I woke early, sunlight spilling through the blinds, but it brought no warmth, only clarity. Months of planning, of patience, of careful observation were about to converge. Marcus believed the house, the finances, even the perception of my weakness protected him. He was wrong. Every smile I had given, every nod, every whispered thank you had been part of the trap. The stage was set, and the first act would unfold quietly, almost imperceptibly. I started with small, deliberate actions. Emails were forwarded, encrypted copies sent to authorities. My attorney positioned strategically. I walked through the house.com/measured, my movements slow and intentional. Marcus did not notice. He never did. That was always his mistake. He had underestimated me. By mid-morning, I heard him on the phone, his voice high-pitched, frustrated. He was questioning a transaction I had set in motion through my attorney. His casual arrogance was cracking. He could feel something wrong, but he did not know what. That subtle hesitation in his voice, The way he repeatedly checked figures and documents thrilled me. Months of subtle manipulation were now creating cracks in his armor. I kept my composure when he entered the living room, carrying a folder, eyes darting nervously. "Lena, we need to talk," he said. I smiled politely, sat calmly, let him talk. He could not see me watching, calculating every word. He floundered through explanations, his face tight with anger and disbelief. How did this happen? Everything was under control. I managed it. He shouted, slamming the folder onto the table. Documents scattered across the surface, revealing accounts frozen, transfers halted, legal notices he could not ignore. I remained silent, calm. Every shred of self-restraint I had practiced was paying off. I let him spill his frustration while the evidence I had painstakingly gathered spoke louder than any argument he could make. Later, I watched from the hallway as he confronted his mistress, the woman who had shared his smug confidence for months. She was shocked, confused, her mask of superiority slipping as Marcus realized she could not fix what was unraveling. Their whispers became frantic, their movements frantic. I stayed hidden, breathing slowly, savoring every moment of the facade crumbling around them. By noon, the first of his colleagues arrived, people who had once admired him for his confidence and decisiveness. They were met with documents, emails, and verifiable evidence that painted a very different picture. Marcus tried to talk, to explain, to charm them with rehearsed words. But charm cannot cover betrayal when proof stands in the room like a judge. Their eyes narrowed. Their expressions shifted from doubt to disbelief. I could feel the tension building. Every glance Marcus threw my way was laced with panic. Every gesture, once confident and commanding, now faltered. I remained seated, calm, collected, letting him implode under the weight of the reality he had ignored for months. The afternoon sun slanted across the floor as I watched him pacing in the living room, the very air around him thick with anxiety. He had always believed that manipulation could hide the truth, that arrogance would shield him from exposure. He was learning slowly that truth is heavier than deceit. I allowed a single soft laugh to escape. Not mocking, not cruel, but quiet. Controlled a whisper that reminded him I had been awake all along. He looked at me sharply, panic flashing in his eyes, but he could not speak. His world was collapsing too fast for words. The legal system took its course with relentless precision. Summons were issued, bank accounts frozen, transfers reversed. Marcus's control over the house, over finances, over perception was stripped away piece by piece. And all the while, I remained poised, my mind a calm storm, watching as the inevitable unfolded. Even in private moments, his unraveling was cinematic. The man who had once strutted through the house with quiet arrogance now sat slumped at his desk. Phone ringing unanswered, calls from associates ignored. His mistress left, disgusted, realizing that the fortress of lies she had been part of was collapsing. She was gone, leaving him exposed, weak, and alone. I allowed myself to feel the first taste of release. Not joy exactly, not yet. Satisfaction? Yes. It's the careful orchestration, the patience, the observation it had all worked. And Marcus, for the first time in his life, knew what it was to be powerless. Micro-hooks had been woven into every interaction. The subtle hesitation in his voice, the missteps, the unraveling gestures, the glances that betrayed anxiety. I had prepared for months, observing, calculating, waiting for the perfect sequence. The collapse was complete. By evening, the final confrontation was unavoidable. He approached me in the living room, defeated. His eyes were wide, pleading. Every arrogance, every calculated cruelty, every false confidence had evaporated. He looked at me as though for the first time really seeing me not as weak, not as fragile, but as the orchestrator of his downfall. I do not understand, he whispered. How? How did this happen? I leaned back, calm, serene. You underestimated me, I said. Every word deliberate, each syllable carrying the weight of months of deception and betrayal. You believed I was powerless. You believed I would remain silent. That was your mistake. He sank into the nearest chair, utterly defeated. The realization hit him that every casual lie, every act of manipulation, every betrayal had been documented, preserved, and used to orchestrate the exact downfall he had never imagined. Outside, the world seemed to move normally. People walked their dogs. Cars honked. But inside, everything had changed. Marcus's world, meticulously built on lies and arrogance, lay in ruins, and I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. Relief surged through me in waves, stronger than any anger, any pain I had endured. It was not vengeance that brought me peace, was justice, meticulously executed, carefully documented, perfectly timed. The man who had planned my erasure could now witness fully the consequences of underestimating me. I walked through the house later that night, touching surfaces, reclaiming spaces that had felt foreign for months. Every room carried echoes of the past, betrayal, fear, humiliation, but now they felt smaller. Contained the fear that had gripped me was gone, replaced by clarity. Power had been restored quietly, deliberately, methodically. Marcus stayed in the study, staring blankly at documents he could no longer control, the remnants of his arrogance scattered across the desk. I allowed myself a final calm smile as I passed him in the hallway. No words, no gloating. He did not deserve that, because the real victory was mine alone, the restoration of my voice, my autonomy, and my life. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, near erasure, and emerged stronger, sharper, and fully aware of my own power. The night closed around the house, silent except for the soft hum of the city outside. I stood by the window, looking at the horizon, feeling the weight of months lift from my shoulders. Relief, satisfaction, triumph. Every calculated step had worked. Every patient observation had paid off. And Marcus, who had believed he controlled everything, had learned in the harshest way what it meant to underestimate someone he thought was weak. And I finally allowed myself to feel the enormity of it. I had been silent, I had been patient, and I had been smart. Now, the man who had tried to erase me was powerless. And the woman he tried to destroy stood taller, unbroken, unstoppable. The storm had ended, and I was free. The night after Marcus's downfall, the house was quiet in a way it had not been for years. The silence was no longer oppressive, no longer heavy with fear or tension. It felt expansive, almost sacred. Every shadow seemed smaller, every corner brighter, every echo of past betrayal reduced to memory. I walked through the rooms slowly, deliberately, touching surfaces I had avoided for months. Each touch carried a silent acknowledgement. I had survived. I had endured. I had emerged intact. I thought back to the moments that had brought me here. The whispers, the lies, the laughter behind my back, the casual cruelty. Every instance that had once felt like an arrow piercing my heart was now fuel. Pain had transformed into precision, betrayal into strategy, fear into clarity. I realized that suffering is not weakness, it is preparation. Every cruel act Marcus had inflicted had honed me, sharpened me, made me aware of my own strength. It is strange how the mind works after such a long period of observation and patience. I no longer felt rage as a blinding force. I felt it as a tool. It was measured, controlled, directed. It had guided me, but it had never consumed me. I had let strategy, careful planning, and unwavering patience dictate my actions. And the payoff had been far beyond anything anger alone could have achieved. The house, once a prison of manipulation and quiet terror, now felt like a sanctuary. Sunlight poured through the blinds, glinting off the polished surfaces, illuminating the life I had reclaimed. I moved through the rooms, imagining a future unburdened by fear, unchained from the control of someone who had believed he owned me. Every step was deliberate, affirming. Every breath carried a sense of liberation. I thought about karma not as a mystical concept, but as the inevitable consequence of choices. Marcus had believed himself clever, untouchable. He had believed that cruelty and manipulation could secure his life indefinitely. But actions have weight. Lies accumulate. Betrayal leaves traces. And when the time comes, the universe, or perhaps just justice, ensures balance. He had sown arrogance and deceit, and he had reaped exposure and defeat. There was no drama in it, no immediate fireworks. Just inevitable consequence, silent and precise, much like the revenge I had orchestrated. Lessons emerged from the wreckage. First, never allow fear to dictate your limits. Fear is temporary. Its power only lasts until one decides to act with awareness and strategy. Second, patience is more potent than immediate retaliation. I had learned to watch, to record, to calculate. Every small detail became critical in constructing a path toward justice. Third, never underestimate the strength of clarity. When mind and intention align, no betrayal is insurmountable. I also recognized a stark truth. Forgiveness is optional, and sometimes it is unnecessary. Marcus does not deserve forgiveness. He will carry the weight of his choices, the knowledge that he underestimated me. And that realization alone is sufficient consequence. I do not need to temper justice with mercy. Justice, when executed with precision, requires no apology, no absolution. It is absolute. As I moved into my bedroom, I paused by the window, looking at the horizon. The sky was painted with the soft colors of dawn. Light always feels sharper after darkness. I realized that this was more than just revenge. This was reclamation. I had taken back not only what he had tried to steal, my assets, my home, my voice, but also what he could never touch, my confidence, my autonomy, my identity. The woman who had been silenced, mocked, and manipulated now stood tall, unbroken, fully herself. There was a profound sense of new beginnings. I could plan my life without constraint, without fear. Every decision I made now would be mine alone, guided by wisdom and the lessons of survival. I could pursue opportunities I had once feared. I could embrace relationships, career ambitions, even simple daily joys without the shadow of manipulation darkening them. Each sunrise would be a reminder that I had reclaimed my life fully, deliberately, irrevocably. Yet the emotional satisfaction went beyond mere victory. It was deeply personal. The liberation was not loud, not dramatic. It was quiet, measured, intimate. I could feel the weight of months, even years, of anxiety and powerlessness lifting from my shoulders. My body, which had endured stress and tension, relaxed in ways it had not in a long time. Sleep returned naturally, no longer haunted by whispers or fear. Peace was not a gift. It was earned. In reflection, I understood that empowerment comes not from luck, not from immediate confrontation, but from meticulous preparation and unwavering resolve. I had been underestimated at every turn, and yet that underestimation became my weapon. I had converted weakness into strength, fear into strategy, and betrayal into precision. The culmination of these elements created an outcome that was inevitable and fair. The horizon outside the window seemed infinite, a perfect mirror for the opportunities ahead. I realized that revenge, though satisfying, was not the final step. The true victory lay in embracing the life I had reclaimed, fortified by wisdom and courage. The past remained a teacher, but it would no longer dictate the narrative. I could live fully, freely, consciously. Every choice, every step was mine alone. The quiet strength in me now felt absolute. No longer reactive, no longer measured by the manipulations of others. I had become the architect of my destiny. Every moment of suffering, every betrayal, every painful observation had led me to this moment. The universe had delivered justice, not as spectacle, but as precise consequence, and I had been the instrument. I allowed a small, satisfied smile. There was no celebration, no public announcement. Just recognition of the work done, the justice achieved, and the freedom reclaimed. The woman who had endured and observed, who had been silent but aware, was now fully awakened. The past no longer held dominion. I had reclaimed it, restructured it, and transformed it into power. The night deepened, yet I remained at the window, watching the city lights flicker. Life continued beyond the house, beyond the moments of betrayal, beyond the manipulation. And I understood fully, my story, my survival, my victory was mine alone. It required patience, observation, and resolve, but it was complete. Justice was delivered. I was free. And now I could begin anew. If this story moved you, smash that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about the moment you reclaimed your power or witnessed justice. Every story matters, and your voice could inspire someone who feels powerless to find strength and take back control of their life.